I understand I'm preaching to the choir this morning. And I understand, especially in the present day, that there is much economic upheaval. And these are very, very challenging times. But you know, I begin my 26th year of local church ministry, 16 as your pastor. And it's always been amazing to me. We find ourselves now in recession, and unemployment, and interest rates, and all that stuff that we look at in our economy. And then we come together as people and as a church, and we talk about how we need to cut back and do this and do that because of the difficult times, and they are difficult. But what's amazing to me over 26 years is I've never had a discussion in any meeting or any small group when times were good, and they have been, when interest rates were rising, and they have, when unemployment was low, and it has been. I've never had a discussion about what we do with our abundance. The discussion always happens when things are tough and how we need to cut back. Well, if we have it that way, then when things get better in a year or two or three, as is indicated, I can't wait for that discussion on how we're going to share that abundance with others. Because historically, friends, historically in the Christian church, do you realize that more is usually given in difficult times than in times of prosperity? Historically, across the scope of our faith tradition, people give more during difficult times than they do in times of abundance. Why? Because they have to reassess. They take a look, a step back, and see what's important to them. So with that as a backdrop, before we come to communion, I wanted to share some, I hope, helpful suggestions to us. As we look at our barns, as we look at our wealth, as we look at our abundance, and seriously consider some of these reflections this morning, I'd like to share with you very briefly. And the first suggestion I want to give to us all is the idea to enter into life and live it more simply. To live a simpler life, a simpler lifestyle, to summon the courage and see life as it is, to understand that we have an awesome responsibility to manage our wealth that God has given us, because we are all stewards of that wealth. Randy Alcorn, in his book entitled The Treasure Principle, describes it this way. It's a matter of physics. The greater the mass, the bigger the mass, the greater the hold the mass exerts. You have something that's small, there's not much mass exerted. You have something big, it exerts more mass. So the same thing with the things we own. The greater their total mass, the more they grip us, set us into orbit around them, and finally, like a black hole, they suck us in. Every item we buy is one more thing to think about, talk about, clean, repair, rearrange, fret over, and replace when it goes bad. Happy shopping, Walmart shoppers. You see, in the scripture, it talks about actual barns to hold the man's crops. But we have a lot of barns also. The barns of our lives. Those things we think about and worry about and stew about. And what I call us this morning to is a spring cleaning of our lives where we actually might downsize and understand that Madison Avenue and the things they peddle are not that urgent at all. But the second idea or suggestion I want to give you is for us to take time to evaluate our giving. If I ask this question, could you answer it? How much of what you make do you share? Do you know the answer to that off the top of your head? For most, it's a question that is never pondered. And as I start my 16th year with you, I began thinking in my office as I was writing down these thoughts of two things that constantly come at me, two ideas from the church family that constantly has come at me at 16 years into ministry here. And on one hand, I've heard many times how grateful you are that I preach from the Bible. How grateful you are that every Sunday there's a scripture reading. I try to unpack it and try to enlighten something in that. But on the other hand, which is such an irony, many times the leaders of the church are accused of talking about money too much. Let me ask you a question. In the Bible, Jesus preaches 34 parables. 34. 34 teachings of Jesus. Let's play Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? How many of those 34 parables do you think, and keep this to yourself, do you think deal specifically with money? Of the 34 parables of Jesus, can you get a number in your brain as to how many deal not on the periphery but directly about money? And the answer is 16. 16 deal specifically about money. Now, the last time I went to school, that's about half. Half of what Jesus preached, taught, and instructed deals with money. Do you see the issue we have? I'm so glad you preach from the Bible, but don't talk about money. Jesus spent half his time talking about it. And I would be remiss if I didn't either, because it is important and we can't have it both ways. You can't explore the Bible without exploring abundance and wealth. It was Dr. Carl Menninger, a mental health expert, that once said this, quote, "Generous people are seldom mentally unstable." I just thought that was pretty neat. Generous people are seldom mentally unstable. Counseling 101. I remember the first week in seminary, Counseling 101, when someone comes in who's self-absorbed, who might be depressed, who might be dealing with personal issues, what's the first thing you want to tell them? Go help somebody. Get out of your own way. Go help someone and serve someone. Look beyond yourself. And that's what giving does. How do we know when we give enough? I'll give you my litmus test. Giving must be sacrificial. How many here have raised kids? Was it a sacrifice? My goodness. How many are dealing with elderly parents and going that route? That's how many of them are with us today? That's sacrificial. I believe anything worthwhile has to be sacrificial. But so many times giving is often off the top, or we think it's inconvenience, or it's a drudgery. But I hope that it is a commitment of joy and a faithful response. So our call this morning, I hope, is to a simpler lifestyle. Our call this morning is to evaluate what we give, because finally, I believe that giving authenticates our faith. I believe giving is perhaps the most tangible, honest, genuine, and invulnerable part of our faith. In the book of Luke, in the 12th chapter, 34th verse, it says, "Our heart is where our riches are." It is a reflection of what's most important to us and where we've placed our heart. Because here's the dilemma. I believe in the Christian church we have confused belief and faith. I don't think they're the same. As a matter of fact, I think many times they're different. We often believe that you have to believe something. That's where it is. You have to believe in salvation and heaven and hell. Have to believe in the Bible and creation and forgiveness. Have to believe in the cross. But none of that makes any difference at all if they are not expressions of how we live our lives. That's faith. What we believe makes little difference if it's not played out in our lives. And I believe in this parable of the rich fool, that in our faith, you and I need to realize we are the rich fool.